What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So it looks like a certain game is heading to the Switch too, and we've kind of already talked about it, but now some code is getting out there through a data mining that does show this, and it would mark a return to Nintendo for a franchise that's been missing since the Wii U days, and we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about an update around the current DRAM squeeze, as many are wondering when there'll be any kind of relief. Well, now we're starting to hear at least about a year that could be in mind for that, and people aren't going to like to hear this one. And we'll also be talking about Final Fantasy, as people wonder what would be the big remake coming out of Square Enix going forward after 7. Well, the one that apparently a lot of new hires there enjoy probably wouldn't be your first choice. All of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. We're going to start today with Microsoft and their Xbox Developer Direct that's coming up on January 22nd. Currently, there are 3 games that have been outlined to be there, 2 from Playground Games, 1 from Game Freak, interestingly enough. But there is a secret 4th game, at least that's the rumor going around right now, and we have been able to at least narrow it down a bit more. This we can see over on VGC, as they did come in with an update later on saying VGC understands the 4th title is a smaller scale original game from an Xbox studio. And apparently the studio is going around right now that could be there to present a secret 4th game is Double Fine, which is kind of surprising since, well, they just released Lighthouse to cap off 2025. Would they have another smaller game to show here? The thing is, they could show up with some kind of smaller, more experimental game as a 4th title that wasn't even promised, as we're expecting a lot out of Playground Games. Coming with a 4th game that's kind of a surprise, and maybe it's not blowing the roof off the place, but it looks different and interesting, then yeah, I mean, we'll see what they have there. But for now, it's still a mystery, but it seems like Double Fine may be the leading guess at this time. Also, Anthem is officially shutting down today, although I guess it shut down, a week or so ago for people, even with a digital copy, since EA wasn't letting you load it even if you bought the game. Very strange stuff there. However, I did have a chance to play it. I have the physical disc for Anthem. Don't ask, but I mean, back then when it released, there was a lot of hype going into it. I was like, you know what, I'll check it out. I'll buy it physically. Turned out to be a good choice since I was able to load into the game, and I spent some time running around doing a mission and just going in free play mode and flying around just to give one final look at Anthem. But once again, it does go back to the idea of, wow, these games really can just disappear even though you bought the game and added it to your library. They can kind of take it away from you by shutting the game down rather than providing some sort of offline mode, because if you play Anthem, there could certainly be a way to have, I figure, an offline mode where you can play through the campaign and then maybe do some of the endgame missions and loot collection all on your own locally, but not the case, and it's gone after today. Oh, and while we're hanging out waiting to hear more about Dragon Quest XII and heading towards Dragon Quest VII Reimagined with that new demo that is a lot of fun and I completely recommend it, we did get a sales update for Dragon Quest XI that was, I mean, buried pretty far down the press release. You can see they do mention that it has sold more than 9 million units globally. Well, they say shipped, but yeah, basically, they've sent out 9 million units globally to date for Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age. And I mean, the game is awesome. It's also going on, I mean, a good part of a decade now since it released, but it's had multiple releases as well. It's easy recommendation across the board, but it also does then remind you, wow, it's been a while since we've had that last big numbered Dragon Quest game, and it does, at least at this time, seem like we probably will go about 10 years from 11 to 12. So here's hoping that 12 ends up meeting those expectations that have been set. For nothing else then, it's been a while since the last one. Surely it can sell well. I think Square knows that at this time, so hopefully they have taken the time to make sure the game is high quality and is captivating right out of the gate, and is different enough to maybe make its own mark in Dragon Quest history. But at least for now, 11 rolling along, closing in, I'd say, even on 10 million copies sold. And if you haven't experienced it, I highly recommend checking it out. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a franchise that appears set to make its return to the Switch that hasn't been there since the Wii U days. And those were some dark days for Nintendo. But Activision Blizzard, they tried it. They did put Call of Duty there and then left and never came back. At least not until now. And we've heard some whispers here and there that it seemed like Activision was preparing, of course with Microsoft, to release some sort of Call of Duty on the Switch 2. Now we're getting some more, just tangible evidence of this, and you can see this was dropped on social media from Reality, saying, yeah, it's looking like a Nintendo cross-COD is imminent whenever the next round of Nintendo announcements are expected, as they do show some data mining with the code here, and you can see Nintendo multiple different times here for platform family, and it looks like it's stacked right there next to things like Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, Steam. There's just Nintendo account, and they would have to tie all of that together, as I would assume there is full crossplay. That would only make sense for Call of Duty to exist at all in that multiplayer setting, is to let everyone play across the board. Now, the question, of course, has come up, what Call of Duty are they going to put there? It's kind of this weird spot right now because we all know there's going to be a Call of Duty 2026. So do you move Black Ops 7 over? That hasn't exactly lit the world on fire. It hasn't been the most exciting or well-received Call of Duty. It's so much so that Activision had to kind of apologize to the user base, like, hey, we're going to work a bit more to not seem like we're phoning some of this stuff in with just Black Ops, Black Ops, Black Ops, Modern Warfare, Modern Warfare, Modern Warfare. We'll change things up here and there. Not a lot, but we will change it up somewhat. So do you then go, oh, here's Black Ops 7? I think the correct route here would be something like Call of Duty Warzone. It's still supported on last generation, and technically so was Black Ops 7, but I just think Warzone has a much brighter future, you could say, ahead of it than something like Black Ops 7 that when 2026 comes out, which should be another Modern Warfare, I assume, would then kind of work in circulation as the big new one that would replace it. Not necessarily across the board, as some people will still prefer Black Ops 7, but be the one that's really heavily advertised. It would be strange if they did that and then also put on the Switch 2 a few months even after Black Ops 7 shows up. So Warzone, I think, makes the most sense. And if you're curious about how it's going to run on the Switch 2, because I certainly am, when we see a lot of these ports happen, usually they sit somewhere between the PS4 and the PS5. Like almost that PS4 Pro territory, but also still not quite, since the Switch 2 does have access to much faster media. It's not dealing with an older spinning hard drive. So things like quick data, read-writes, all of that is available to it. And if you watch PS4 gameplay, which, that would be like the lowest end possible at this time for something like the newer Black Ops 7, you can see things are struggling to load in, but it is still running at a somewhat decent frame rate, and it's not just a smeared Vaseline effect on screen. Doesn't look the greatest, but it does run. So I'm kind of expecting above that the ability to stream in assets easier, higher resolution, upscaling the whole thing, and I think it'll actually be a pretty decent performance all the way around for Call of Duty on the Switch 2. Will it be a good game? That's another question, and we'll see how that turns out as we get towards the end of 2026 when they inevitably release the next one. Next up, we have an update on the DRAM squeeze that's happening, where we know pretty much everything that's associated to RAM, which is just about all of our electronics, are going up in price because RAM is becoming more and more difficult to procure at this. So behind the scenes, a lot of that's being eaten up by AI, because you're seeing these companies just standing up tons and tons of data centers, and even OpenAI, as an example, is accounting for 40% of the entire DRAM supply this year in 2026 already. So then factor in all the other companies, and it's becoming difficult. DDR5 is through the roof in terms of pricing, and it's spilling over into video cards, into solid-state memory for any of the drives, NVMe, any of that stuff. Well, we're starting to hear maybe about when there could be some relief, and this is coming from good old Micron, who I will say before this statement spent quite a while trying to damage control a bit their decision to back away from the consumer-facing market with Crucial and go all in on AI. Anyway, this is over, we can see on WCCF Tech, and they are discussing this in an interview with Micron's VP of Marketing, Christopher Moore, where he says, "We broke ground in Idaho in our ID1 facility 3 years ago, and that's going to come around online in mid-2027. We pulled that, it was end of 2027, we pulled it into mid-2027, but you're not really going to see the real output. Meaningful output by the time we get all the qualification done and customers are accepting it, and you get the tools, everything up and running until 2028, 2028. Memory manufacturers are scrambling to build newer production lines, yet constraints of the process eventually force them to push the timelines ahead by several quarters, which means that for the average consumer, the DRAM shortages could persist for quite some time now, or at least until the AI demand starts to fade away. And I hate to say it, I don't think the AI demand is going to fade away for a few years now. I think 2028 is sooner than the AI demand starts to fade, and I'm looking at maybe 2029 or 2030, just based on OpenAI's own like public-facing plans with their entire Stargate project thing they're doing right now. It seems like they're going to need significant amounts of DRAM for quite some time. And the solve we figured was, oh, okay, well, more facilities will open up, more production lines, and eventually the supply will meet the demand. However, many of these companies are concerned about going all in on that, and then AI does slow down, and you're just left with an overabundance of RAM that they've been creating, and they're kind of left really just holding the bag. It's just this odd situation, and unfortunately, we're kind of caught in the middle of it with prices that we can see at retail stores jumping considerably, 100, 200%. That RTX 5090 that we discussed and how NVIDIA was apparently saying behind the scenes that it could jump twofold, it already has, it seems like. I mean, I'm looking around at retail stores and it's $3,500 to $4,000. And it was just $2,000 or so dollars, depending on where you looked, a month ago. So this is, it's rough right now. And I think 2026, it's not gonna get much better in 2027. And yeah, we may be going until 2028 unless some crazy thing happens, whether AI falls off a cliff or they do reach super intelligence and then you don't even need RAM anymore. Who knows what that future looks like, but for now I can tell you, prices probably not going down anytime soon. Next up, let's talk about a strange situation that's unfolding around Baldur's Gate 3 and that Switch 2, as there was an AMA or Ask Me Anything over on Reddit, and the CEO at Larian did kind of pull the curtain back a bit on this and as to why there's no Baldur's Gate 3 game right now or port on the Switch 2, and would it even be possible? Well, we can see this. This is over on Reddit with their response, and they were pretty straightforward. We would have loved to, but it wasn't our decision to make. And it also, by the way, sounds like they've kind of moved on from it. Like they've come to terms with the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 is probably not going to go to the Switch 2 ever. And this, of course, has left a lot of questions as to, okay, hold on a minute. So Larian would have loved to do it, but someone somewhere is holding this whole thing up. All right, so if we look at the Engadget, they say, as cryptic as that may sound, the response hints that either Wizards of the Coast, which owns the Dungeons & Dragons IP that Baldur's Gate 3 is set in, or Nintendo is behind the lack of a port. And I did see some people were pointing at Nintendo. If you just take one look at the eShop right now, the odds of this being Nintendo are, I mean, they're so slim. So I guess Wizards of the Coast, that's the only other party that would be involved here for this. It seems strange that they would go, no, we don't want more money for a port. Like, Baldur's Gate 3, I think would do very, very well on the Switch 2. I mean, I don't think it would lose them money for what it would cost to do the port versus the growing audience of the Switch 2, because you port it over there and it's going to stay there. It's not like it's for sale for 1 week and then you pull the thing. It'll be there for the rest of the generation that, I mean, Nintendo should be building, and we assume if it doesn't reach, say, the Nintendo Switch 1, more than 150 million in terms of the stall size, I think many people out there are probably like, yeah, I can see it get 100 million, you know, in terms of, so that's a significant number to sell to. So the money side doesn't make sense. And the only other conclusion is there really is some kind of issue or back and forth or disagreement between Wizards of the Coast and Larian. And it seems like Larian's even moving on from Baldur's Gate at this time, and they're looking more towards Divinity. They did the whole remaster that they did also release on the Switch 2 and other platforms. So now with their new one also aiming more towards Divinity, it just ends up being a shame for a lot of the players and of course people on the Switch 2, especially since you could have done cross progression and gone between maybe like PC and then also over to the Switch 2 for handheld and portable play, or vice versa with a PS5 to the Switch 2. So A lot of possibilities were there, but it seems like, at least for now, some kind of stalemate behind the scenes, and hard to say if it ever gets resolved. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Square Enix and, of course, how they're doing a lot of the remakes for Final Fantasy, with really just focusing currently on Final Fantasy VII that's turned into a 3-part epic that hopefully they can wrap up before the end of this generation, but now they may have until 2030 at this rate, who knows? But it seems like Part 3 is getting ever closer, as we go into the new year. But there was one thing I saw that made me feel a bit old, but also made me think about how things can change internally at some of these studios and how that may sway their decision as to where to go next when it comes to remakes. Because I see people all the time go, they should remake Final Fantasy VI. That is the best one, and it makes the most sense, and it's what I remember from my childhood. Well, the thing is, we're getting kind of old. So our childhood isn't necessarily the childhood of, the newer generation coming in. So take a look. This is posted over on social media by Genki, saying the Final Fantasy VII remake director Naoki Hamaguchi did speak in an interview about this, saying, so recently, because the company has been growing and changing as new employees come in, and the company just keeps going on, the younger folk who come in don't say Final Fantasy VI anymore. They say, oh yeah, Final Fantasy XIII was my favorite. So I really do feel the passing of the ages, as in, yeah, I'm getting old. We're all getting old, because Final Fantasy XIII is the go-to for the new generation. Now, if you think about it, 13 came out in Japan first, December 2009, followed up in the US when I remember it released, March 2010. And this was a big release because it came out on the Xbox 360, and that was weird. We were so used to Final Fantasy, other than Final Fantasy XI, I will say that, the online game. But for the mainline numbered single-player games, it was PlayStation. But here it was showing up on the Xbox 360, and I remember I bought it on the 360. 2010, the 360 was like riding high at that point. We were coming off of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and everybody I was looking around at was mostly playing 360, and I was kind of the strange one at the time with the fat PS3 model, playing things like MLB The Show and Infamous and stuff like that. But I did get it on the 360, and looking back on it, maybe not the best decision, since the PS3 version was just better because the Blu-ray did allow it to just store higher quality just about everything across the board, but it was kind of cool to get the 3 discs that came with it, so it felt sort of nostalgic to it. But that was a while ago. It's hard to remind people all the time of that, but you thinking, oh wow, that was almost 16 years ago. Huh, wow, that was a while ago. So now here come people who may be in their early 20s, getting out of college, and then going in as interns, or even if they're just newer hires in their late 20s, Final Fantasy XIII is kind of their childhood, and that's the one they look back on very fondly. I still think even Final Fantasy X, though, that's 2001. Yeah, I guess 13 would be the move. And you know what? I will say, I wouldn't be opposed to getting a Final Fantasy XIII remake, just to see if maybe they can change or alter some things there, modernize it, quote unquote. But there were some things I think they can clean up in a game that could end up being very, very good. I still have some nostalgia for 13, but I also look at it as one of the weaker Final Fantasies, like overall in the entire history of the franchise. But hey, we saw what they did with Final Fantasy VII, so they're willing to go crazy and Nomura the whole thing up. Why not? Let's see what they can do with 13. That is already a multi-part franchise anyway. Oh, maybe that's the move. Instead of what they did with 7, they do the reverse Final Fantasy VII remake. They take like the 3 games and just jam it into one. And maybe that, with a quick pace and some altered gameplay, maybe that could actually do it for Final Fantasy XIII. We'll see if maybe some of the younger generation coming in gains some control, maybe knocks a pitch out of the park for Final Fantasy XIII Remake, and we see that in a few years. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. First, though, we will start with Game of the Year madness that happened over the weekend, and that was Hades 2 taking down Mario Kart World. We are now into the second phase of the brackets. We finished the first round, so round 2 is here. You're going to see some bigger matchups, and there you go, Hades 2 knocking out Mario Kart World. And you can see Metal Gear Solid Delta knocking out Blue Prince. That was 59% to 41%. Again, we're going to see some big matchups here as we start to whittle down this bracket. And I'm really curious, because I've gone through and moved the different names and titles around to see the matchups. There's some good ones coming up here in the next couple of days. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Zach, who says, I think Nintendo is stuck with this black Joy-Con 2 design because they don't want to confuse consumers while they still have the OG ones on the shelves. I saw that a lot. People were saying, hey, if it was all like purple or green, it might look a little too much like the Switch 1 Joy-Cons. And I mean, I guess, so the thing is, I think they could do just a bit more with the accent colors because they are hidden when you attach them to the Switch 2 in handheld mode. Some were showing, oh, you could change the lettering on the front face buttons or the symbols like the share button or home button or whatever. They can also match those same accent colors of purple or green. There just has to be a little more, I think, done here to, and not even really justify the cost is one thing already, because it's $100 for a pair of Joy-Con 2s no matter which way you go, the standard or these newer colors, but just, I mean, it just seems like kind of a phoned in effort for this. Maybe even some etchings around the Joy-Con 2s, although while these are placed next to Mario Tennis Fever, doesn't necessarily look like it's completely next to it where you do go all out and you have, I don't know, some kind of etching for the game on the Joy-Con 2s. So maybe we'll see something like that when Fire Emblem shows up, as they have kind of played around with some limited edition things with their first party games that are more so than just changing up some of the colors. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card, or maybe you did want to see the final day of Anthem. Again, I logged in and checked it out for like 15 minutes, and I'll leave that right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.